Hi.
Hello again. We've reached Genesis chapter 6. We want to read first verses 1 to 8 and then 9 to 13 afterwards. In the NIV?
Yes. When men began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal. His days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. The Lord saw how great man's wickedness on the earth had become, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time. The Lord was grieved that he had made man on the earth, and his heart was filled with pain. So the Lord said, I will wipe mankind, whom I have created, from the face of the earth, men and animals and creatures that move along the ground, and birds of the air, for I am grieved that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord.
I suppose the first controversy is here the identity of these sons of God. There's two basic theories. One is the sons of God are the good guys, the line of Seth, let's say, contrasting with the line of Cain. But the dominant theory today seems to be that they're angelic sons of God.
Yeah, I would favor that they're angelic, because, why would the good guys be producing the Nephilim? Fellers is what that means, right?
Well,
Nephilim?
yeah, the fellers, or the violent ones, the heroes. From a human standpoint, they were heroes, but from God's standpoint, they were violent ones who were corrupting mankind. And the fact that point explicitly is made in verse 4, right? The Nephilim were on the earth and afterward, so maybe even after the flood, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them, the mighty men. The law, and then the connection right away to the wickedness of man being great on the earth. So these seem to be the ringleaders in this wickedness, right?
Yeah.
So this goes to answer the comments that we get all too frequently on our channel about the Old Testament God being a vindictive and petulant being compared to the Father in the New Testament. It doesn't look like vindictiveness to me. If you know the chronology of the Old Testament, you know that minimally, according to the short chronology, 1,600 years, 1,500 plus, because there's 120 years countdown here to the flood. So 1,500 years by the tight chronology has already passed by, and God has been watching the wickedness grow. So he could be accused, and has been accused many times in the Old Testament itself, of being too indulgent.
Yeah, waiting too long. But he can't win, really, because if he acts, it's like, whoa, he's so petty, he's so angry. And yet if he doesn't act, he's not just. What's he waiting for?
Yeah.
So he really can't win. But I think the only emotion you see in this passage is that the Lord is grieved and filled with pain. So to me that doesn't sound like our version of anger and vindictiveness.
No, it's continual pain in the heart of God. Even to the point where that stumbling block verse about it repented God in the King James.
To make
he repented of making man. Well, it doesn't mean what you think it means. But what we see in verse 5, the wickedness of man was great in the earth. Every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. How's this happen? And that's what the Calvinists would call total depravity, by the way.
Yeah. Not
that man is totally corrupt in every area, but every aspect of his humanity is touched by corruption.
Yeah.
That's the T in that famous tulip former of Calvinism.
Yeah.
I can't help but think, too, of that passage in Ecclesiastes which is Ecclesiastes 8:11, because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily. The heart of the children of man is fully set to do evil. So the thought in Ecclesiastes is that because it appears from the human viewpoint that God is procrastinating and not judging frequently enough and not bringing to the bar those who commit continued injustice and unrighteousness, it only hardens men's unbelief. And I think you see that here, that if they're becoming more and more wicked, what's the justification for their descent, the descent of man? So no, when God says in verse 7, I will blot out, it's actually Yahweh here. Yahweh said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land. He's actually saving the earth.
Yeah. So it's an act of judgment, but it's an act of mercy as well. I know. And I think the last verse that we read, I don't know if that's what you wanted to comment next, but Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. I think in the past I always thought in terms of that meaning that he was the only good guy.
Yeah.
You know, that he looked around and Noah was a good guy. But favor is undeserved. When you do a favor for a person, you're not paying them.
It's not a reward.
It's an undeserved gesture.
Unmerited favor.
Love.
Is it? Yeah. That's the way a lot of people define grace. It's unmerited favor, or as we define it if we're witnesses, because grace is gone from our Bible, it's undeserved kindness.
But you have to deserve it.
Yeah. So when it says Noah found favor, there's nothing here about the morality or the righteousness of his family, notice. So even if you're a witness, you know that those 7 people who are not commented upon as to their righteousness are in the ark too. So all of it is unmerited favor. God is saving Noah and his family because he wants to save them.
He's preserving some humanity.
Yeah.
That is a gesture of love.
I know you've got a quote from Griffith Thomas.
Yes.
Which is highlighting the contrast between, well, 2 lines of men. We made the point in the last chapter that Noah's line, that is Lamech, Methuselah, and Noah, and Enoch, their great-grandfather of Noah, they are the good guys, if there are any good guys in the narrative. But that contrasts with Cain. There was no mention of any righteousness or any religion in the line of Cain. Yeah.
Griffith Thomas says, in the line of Cain we have cleverness, culture, and civilization. And yet with all these manifest advantages, everything was purely earthly, selfish, and sensual. God was ignored, and they lived their life entirely apart from him. Self-contained, occupied with their own intellectual and social pursuits, they simply ignored the claims of God and lived and died without him.
Ignored the claims of God.
Yeah.
So we wanted to read verses 9 to 13 as well, where all of the things we've just said are underlined again.
Okay. This is the account of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked with God. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on earth had corrupted their ways. So God said to Noah, I am going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth.
Well, of course, he didn't destroy the physical earth. He preserved the physical earth. But the earth that then existed, and its covering, and all the animals upon it, according to the story, all of it is destroyed, and that's a very drastic way of dealing with the corruption of all flesh. But it was the way God chose at that time. He said after the flood he would never do this again. But you've got, interestingly enough, you've got this expression, walked with God here. And it's only recorded that 2 men walked with God. We mentioned one last time, Enoch.
Enoch, yeah.
And now Noah. Nobody else in the Bible is said to have walked with God.
Yeah.
Even Abraham.
Abraham is
walked
said to
before
have
him.
walked before God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the earth is corrupt in God's sight, filled with violence. So what option does God have? It's been well said that God only destroys those who've already destroyed themselves.
Corrupted their ways, yeah.
And I remember that verse in Revelation 11:18, which so impressed me, I think, even before I was baptized. I was reading Revelation avidly, like most of us do. And I saw that verse in 11:18 where it said, "God, the time came when God sets up the kingdom and destroys those who destroy the earth." And that was the year of the first Earth Day, 1970. We were all thinking about the world being destroyed. So here it said that God would not let that happen. So of course it made perfect sense that by 1975 he was going to stop it.
Even going back to him walking with God, just that whole thought that we were mentioning about whether or not a person is just good. Mm-hmm. Now I see it not so much witnesses. You hear heart condition and God is looking for someone who's good, but in Scripture, it's him helping you to be good. He's the one that acts, and I always think of the verse in Romans chapter 3, and I think that's a quote from an Old Testament passage too, isn't it? Where Paul says, "There's not one good."
Not even one.
Not even one.
No one seeks after God.
Yeah. Which just seemed like, what? No, I sought God. But you don't think in terms of what impacts you to do that. What is it that makes you feel that way? It's God that does that.
That's the answer here. So if we had to sequence these three words, in these three words, which would be salvation, revelation, or instead of salvation, let's make it more explicit. Favor or grace, revelation, obedience.
Yeah.
If you're a witness, what do you have to do with those words?
Well, with a witness, you have to be...
You have to have revelation, guidance.
Yeah.
Then you obey.
Yeah.
And then you're saved.
Right.
Or God gives you grace.
Mm-hmm.
But look at the order here.
Is happening here. You've got you've got the grace happening first, and then the revelation, and then
the obedience.
The salvation, or the obedience on the part of the person. Yeah.
He builds the ark after God has already shown him favor by first of all revealing his will to him.
Yeah. So you've got God doing the gesture. It's God that saves, so that you can serve. Which is the reverse of the witnesses as well.
You serve and then God saves.
And then God will maybe save you.
Maybe.
It's always a maybe when you're a witness.
Griffith Thomas has something more to say, I think. Is it page 85?
From grace comes righteousness, and whether we think of its Old Testament meaning of genuineness and sincerity, or of its New Testament fuller meaning of being right with God, Noah was perfect. The original word means upright, genuine, and has no reference to the absence of sin. Uprightness, in turn, is the result of being righteous before God through grace. Our personal character must necessarily be the proof of our true position in the sight of God. Does the Watchtower translate it, Noah was perfect? Because I would think that would cause a problem. Because you already think that nobody's perfect after Adam.
Of course it means complete. And that's the important point. That perfection in the Old Testament never means sinless. Gerhard von Rad says about this, the statement about walking with God is quite isolated. Noah, as the last member of the first eon and the beginner of the new age, is the last one of whom such a thing can be said theologically. Abraham could only walk before God. And I think Thomas has another profound thought.
The divine scrutiny is also stated in simple but solemn terms. God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. How great is the contrast here with a former occasion. God saw everything that he made, and behold, it was very good. That's chapter 1, verse 31.
Yeah.
In the creation, right? God is not indifferent to human life, and the fact of sin necessarily compelled him to take action. His decision to destroy the earth was at once an expression of his justice and his mercy. The end had come, and there was no alternative. Moral putridity,
Nice word.
yeah, can only be destroyed by a divine judgment.
So we think of this as justice and judgment, all right, but do we think of it as mercy? God didn't have to save anyone.
Yeah.
We were all sinners. And Noah recognizes that on the ark, apparently, by offering the clean animals. So he recognizes even his own sinfulness.
Yeah, his desire to preserve humanity.
Here's Derek Kidner. The words corrupted and violence give new insight into the prevailing anarchy and into the ugly side of the might and fame, that is, of the heroes, so-called the Nephilim, noted in verse 4. The Hebrew for corrupted or destroyed also makes it plain that what God decided to destroy had been virtually self-destroyed already.
Right.
We're going to put a link into
Grace. Why do Jehovah's Witnesses have such a huge problem with it? And this particular one was dealing with the passage in Philippians 2:13. What must I do? That's what the jailer asked.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what most people ask. So we always think in terms of doing.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And that, of course, goes to our great discovery when we read through Genesis. So we're going to put a link into the playlist, and the very first one of that is when we studied Genesis. The very first video that's on that playlist is how we learn grace, the greatness of God and the grace of God in the book of Genesis.
Mm-hmm.